A rude guest insulted Kate's parenting. What the royal guard did next shocked the palace best. The palace was glowing that evening, filled with soft lights and quiet movement. From the outside, everything looked calm and perfect, just as people around the world imagined royal life to be. Inside, staff members moved carefully across polished floors, making sure every detail was in place. This was not just any gathering. It was a formal event with important guests, people who had traveled far, people whose words and actions mattered. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, arrived early with her children. She believed that even formal events were moments to teach them how to behave with kindness and confidence. She did not see motherhood as something separate from her royal duties. To her, it was part of who she was. She greeted staff with warm smiles, thanked them by name when she could, and made sure her children did the same. The children stayed close to her side. They were dressed neatly, but not stiffly. Kate wanted them to feel comfortable, not afraid of the space around them. She leaned down once or twice to quietly remind them to stand straight or lower their voices, always gently, never sharply. Those nearby noticed her calm approach. To many, it was a quiet example of patience and care. Across the room, members of the royal guard stood at their posts. Their faces were neutral, their bodies still, but their attention was sharp. Years of training had taught them to notice small changes, a raised voice, an uneasy movement, a shift in mood. They were not only there to protect the royal family from danger, but also to preserve order and respect. Guests began to arrive in small groups. There were diplomats, donors, and invited figures from different fields. Conversation stayed polite and measured. Laughter was soft. Everyone followed the unspoken rules of palace behavior, everyone except one guest. This man arrived with confidence that bordered on arrogance. His smile was tight, his eyes scanning the room as if judging it. He spoke loudly, interrupting others without apology. At first, his behavior seemed merely rude, the kind that people tolerated to avoid discomfort. Staff members exchanged quick glances but said nothing. When the man was introduced to Kate, she greeted him as she greeted everyone else, with grace and courtesy. She introduced her children briefly, keeping the moment short and appropriate. The man nodded, but his attention lingered in a way that made others uneasy. He watched the children too closely, his expression unreadable. As the evening continued, Kate moved through the room, speaking with guests and making sure her children were comfortable. She listened more than she spoke, offering thoughtful responses and small smiles. To many guests, she seemed calm and natural, even in such a formal space. They admired how she balanced her role as a royal figure and a mother without effort. The rude guest, however, kept finding ways to insert himself into conversations near her. He commented on the event, on the palace, and eventually on the children. At first, his remarks were indirect. He mentioned how difficult it must be to raise children in the public eye. Kate nodded politely, choosing not to engage deeply, but then his tone shifted. With a light laugh that did not match his words, he made a remark that questioned her parenting. It was not shouted, it was not openly aggressive, but it carried a sharp edge. He suggested that royal children were often too protected, too soft, and that perhaps a firmer approach was needed. His eyes flicked toward the children as he spoke. The air around them changed instantly. Nearby guests fell silent. A few looked down at their glasses. Others stared, unsure if they had heard correctly. The comment had crossed a line, one that everyone in the room understood without needing it explained. Kate felt the moment deeply, but her expression did not change. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She placed a gentle hand on her child's shoulder and calmly redirected their attention elsewhere. Her response was quiet, controlled, and dignified. She chose to protect her children's peace rather than react to the insult. What the guest did not realize was that the royal guard had noticed everything. From across the room, one guard's posture shifted slightly. Another adjusted his position, his eyes fixed on the guest. They had been trained to recognize threats, but they were also trained to recognize disrespect that could escalate. To them, this was no longer just an uncomfortable comment. It was a breach of conduct. The guards did not speak to each other. They did not need to. Small signals passed between them, subtle movements that meant action was being considered. Their presence, though still quiet, became more focused. Kate continued speaking with other guests, keeping her children close. She maintained the flow of the evening, refusing to let one person's behavior define the moment. But the tension remained, hanging invisibly in the room. The rude guest, unaware of what was unfolding, continued to talk. His confidence grew, mistaking silence for approval. He laughed again, adding another comment that brushed too close to judgment. This time, more people turned their heads. Discomfort spread. The palace, once filled with easy conversation, felt suddenly still, and in that stillness the royal guard prepared to act. The evening was no longer just a gathering. It had become a test of respect, of boundaries, and of quiet strength. The guests sensed it. The staff sensed it. And though Kate remained composed, the palace itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The moment after the comment felt longer than it really was. No one spoke right away. The soft music continued in the background, but it sounded distant now, almost unreal. People shifted their weight, pretending to adjust their stance or take a sip of water, anything to avoid the heavy feeling in the air. Kate stayed calm. She bent slightly toward her children and spoke to them in a low, steady voice. Her words were gentle, meant only for them. She guided them a few steps away, placing herself between them and the rude guest. Her movements were natural, like any caring mother protecting her space. Anyone watching closely could see that she was choosing peace over conflict. Some guests felt admiration rise in their chests. They could see how much effort it took to remain composed in that moment. Others felt anger on her behalf but knew better than to speak out loud. This was the palace. Reactions were measured. Emotions were hidden behind polite expressions. The rude guest, however, mistook the silence for acceptance. He straightened his jacket and continued speaking, his voice confident and careless. He began talking about discipline, about how children needed strict guidance to grow strong. His words were not loud, but they were sharp enough to cut. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. A woman standing nearby glanced at Kate, her eyes filled with concern. Another guest subtly shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. The staff at the edges of the room froze, unsure whether to step in or stay back. Everyone sensed that something was wrong, but no one wanted to be the first to react. The royal guard did not hesitate internally, even though they remained still on the outside. One guard noticed the children's expressions. They were quiet, confused, sensing tension they could not fully understand. That alone was enough to raise concern. Another guard watched the guest's body language. He stood too close. His tone lacked respect. His behavior showed no sign of stopping. Training had taught them one important rule. Protection was not only about physical danger. It was also about dignity. One guard shifted his stance slightly, placing himself at a better angle to see both Kate and the guest. Another moved a step closer, not enough to draw attention but enough to be ready. Their faces remained calm, almost unreadable. To the untrained eye, nothing had changed. But within the guard unit, the situation was now marked as serious. Kate finished her brief conversation with another guest and gently led her children toward a quieter part of the room. She smiled politely as she moved, thanking someone for their kind words. Her calm behavior helped steady the room, but the tension did not disappear. It simply followed her like a shadow. The rude guest watched her walk away. Instead of realizing his mistake, he frowned slightly, as if offended that his words had not been acknowledged. He took a step forward, clearly intending to continue the discussion. That was the moment several guests exchanged looks. Enough was enough. Before he could speak again, a guard positioned himself subtly in the path between the guest and the royal family. The move was smooth and respectful. There was no physical contact, no raised voice, just presence. The guest paused, confused. He tried to step to the side, but another guard adjusted his position as well, blocking the path without making it obvious. The message was quiet but clear. The guest laughed awkwardly, attempting to save face. He made a small comment about the guards being very serious. A few people forced polite smiles. No one laughed sincerely. The guards did not respond. One of them leaned slightly toward the guest and spoke in a low, controlled voice. The words were calm and professional. He reminded the guest of palace etiquette and the importance of respectful behavior, especially in the presence of family. The tone was not angry. It did not need to be. It carried authority. The guest's expression changed. His confidence wavered. For the first time that evening, he realized that his words had consequences. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The room was watching now, even if they pretended not to be. Kate did not turn around. She focused on her children, pointing out a painting on the wall, asking them what colors they liked. Her voice was warm. She refused to give the situation more attention than it deserved. The guard continued speaking briefly, explaining that the guest would be guided to another area of the palace to cool off and reflect. It was phrased as a courtesy, not a punishment, but everyone understood what it meant. The guest's face flushed. He glanced around, hoping for support, but found none. The people he had interrupted earlier avoided his gaze. The ones who had overheard his remarks looked away with disapproval. With no other choice, he nodded stiffly. 2 guards escorted him away at a steady pace. They did not rush him. They did not grip his arms. Their hands remained visible, relaxed. Yet their presence left no room for resistance. The sound of footsteps echoed softly across the marble floor as they moved toward a side corridor. As the guest disappeared from view, the room slowly exhaled. Conversations resumed, though quieter at first. The tension loosened, replaced by a shared understanding of what had just happened. No dramatic scene had unfolded, yet the impact was powerful. Respect had been restored without chaos. Kate finally turned back toward the room. She thanked a nearby guest for their patience and smiled. Her expression showed strength, not relief. She had handled the situation the way she believed was right, by staying true to herself and protecting her children without anger. Several guests felt a renewed sense of respect for her. They saw not just a royal figure, but a mother who knew when to stand firm without raising her voice. The royal guard returned to their positions, just as quiet as before. To anyone new entering the room, it would seem like nothing unusual had happened. But those who had witnessed it would remember. The palace had spoken, not through loud words but through calm action. And the night continued, forever marked by a lesson that would not soon be forgotten. After the guest was escorted away, the palace slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Soft conversations restarted, glasses clinked gently, and the music felt present again. Yet something had changed. The people in the room were more aware now. They spoke with care, choosing words thoughtfully, as if reminded that respect mattered more here than pride. Kate stayed with her children near a quiet corner. She knelt slightly to their level and asked if they were feeling all right. They nodded, though their eyes still held questions. She smiled and reassured them with a calm tone, telling them everything was fine. Her voice was steady, warm, and safe. That steadiness helped them relax, and soon they were listening again as she pointed out details in the room. The tall windows, the soft lights, the old paintings that seemed to watch over everyone. A member of the palace staff approached carefully and asked if Kate needed anything. She thanked them and declined, showing appreciation for their concern. Her calm response sent a clear message. The situation was under control. Across the room, guests exchanged quiet words about what had happened. Some spoke in low voices, careful not to draw attention. Others simply nodded to each other, sharing an unspoken understanding. The incident had been brief, but it left a deep impression. Many of them had expected drama. Instead, they had witnessed something different: quiet authority, firm boundaries, and grace under pressure. That made the moment more powerful than any loud argument ever could. The royal guard stood once again in their original positions. To anyone unfamiliar with palace life, they looked unchanged, still, silent, watchful. But inside, they remained alert. Their duty did not end just because one situation had been handled. They continued scanning the room, watching expressions, listening for shifts in tone. One guard briefly glanced toward Kate and her children, ensuring they were comfortable. Seeing them calm allowed him to return his full focus to the room. This balance, protecting without interrupting, was what defined their role. Time passed. New guests arrived, unaware of what had occurred earlier. They were greeted politely and guided to their places. The palace staff worked smoothly, maintaining the flow of the evening. Everything appeared normal again, yet the earlier tension lingered quietly in memory. Kate eventually rejoined the main gathering, her children staying close. She engaged in conversation with guests who approached her with genuine warmth. Some offered kind words about the event. Others expressed appreciation for how well the children behaved. Kate responded with gratitude, giving credit to her children rather than herself. One older guest, who had observed the incident from afar, spoke softly to another. He said that moments like these revealed true character, not when things were easy, but when they were tested. The other guest agreed, nodding slowly. Meanwhile, the escorted guest was seated in a separate area of the palace, away from the main gathering. A guard remained nearby, not as a threat, but as a reminder of boundaries. The guest sat quietly, his earlier confidence gone. He stared at the floor, replaying the evening in his mind. For the first time, he seemed to understand the weight of his actions. His words, spoken without thought, had caused discomfort in a place built on respect. The calm response he had received left him with no argument, no excuse. Silence in that moment was louder than any correction. Back in the main hall, the event continued smoothly. Speeches were given. Applause followed. The purpose of the gathering, charity, unity, and shared responsibility, returned to the forefront. Kate listened attentively, her posture relaxed, her presence steady. Those who watched her closely noticed something important. She had not allowed the incident to harden her or distract her from the reason she was there. Instead, she carried on with quiet strength, showing that one moment of disrespect did not deserve control over the entire evening. Her children, now more at ease, stood proudly beside her. They followed her example, polite and calm, unaware that they had just been part of a moment others would remember for years. As the evening moved forward, the royal guard received subtle updates through brief exchanges and quiet signals. Everything was stable. No further action was needed. The earlier incident was officially closed, though its lesson remained. A few guests who had witnessed the escort shared their thoughts privately. They spoke about how impressed they were by the professionalism shown. No shouting, no embarrassment, just clear boundaries enforced with dignity. One guest said that true power did not need to announce itself. Another added that respect, once broken, had to be restored calmly or it would only cause more damage. These conversations stayed private, but the ideas spread quietly through the room. Kate eventually led her children toward a seating area, allowing them to rest. She thanked them for being patient and kind throughout the evening. Her words were soft, filled with pride. She did not mention the earlier comment. She chose not to pass that burden on to them. From across the room, a guard observed this moment. He felt a sense of purpose deepen within him. This was why they served, not just to stand watch, but to protect moments like this, moments of calm, of care, of family. As the event approached its later hours, the mood felt balanced again. The palace breathed normally. Guests smiled more easily. The tension had transformed into respect, and respect into quiet unity. The escorted guest would later leave the palace without further incident. No announcement would be made. No public statement would follow. The palace did not need to explain itself. Those who were there understood. For Kate, the evening would be remembered not as a moment of discomfort, but as a reminder of strength. Strength found in silence, in calm choices, and in protecting what mattered most. And for everyone else, it became a story whispered gently over time, not as gossip, but as an example. An example of how dignity, when supported by loyalty and discipline, could speak louder than any insult ever could. As the night moved closer to its end, the palace lights seemed warmer, softer than before. The earlier tension had faded, but the meaning of what happened remained quietly present in every corner of the room. Guests spoke with more care now, choosing kindness in their words. It was as if the palace itself had reminded everyone of its values. Kate stood near a tall window, listening to a guest speak about a community project. She nodded thoughtfully, asking gentle questions. Her attention was sincere. Anyone watching could see that she was fully present, not distracted by the earlier moment. Her calm strength continued to guide the mood of the evening. Her children sat nearby with a staff member, quietly engaged in a simple activity. They laughed softly, their voices light and free again. Kate glanced toward them from time to time, her eyes filled with quiet pride. Seeing them at ease confirmed that she had done the right thing by staying calm and steady. Behind the scenes, palace staff met briefly in hushed tones. They reviewed the evening, ensuring that all protocols had been followed properly. The handling of the situation was discussed not with excitement but with respect. Everyone agreed that the response had been balanced and correct. The royal guard, too, reflected silently. They did not speak openly about the incident, but each of them carried the understanding of what their role truly meant. They were not there to intimidate or create fear. They were there to protect the dignity of the people and the place they served. One guard remembered the look on the guest's face when he realized his behavior had consequences. It was not fear, but awareness. That, the guard knew, was far more meaningful. Awareness could lead to change. In a quiet room away from the gathering, the guest waited until he was informed that the event was nearing its close. He sat still, his earlier confidence gone. Time passed slowly for him. The silence forced him to think, something he had not done before speaking earlier that night. When a guard politely informed him that he could now leave, the guest stood and nodded. There was no argument, no complaint. He walked through the halls with measured steps, noticing details he had ignored before, the portraits on the walls, the quiet respect in the air. He left the palace without a word, carrying with him a lesson that would stay far longer than the memory of embarrassment. Back in the main hall, the final moments of the event unfolded smoothly. Farewells were exchanged. Gratitude was shared. Guests thanked the hosts and staff before departing. Many cast one last respectful glance toward Kate and her children. Several guests approached Kate to offer kind words, not about the incident but about her grace and warmth. She accepted the compliments humbly, redirecting praise toward the causes supported by the event. She did not seek attention. That, in itself, earned even more respect. As the crowd thinned, the palace grew quieter. Chairs were adjusted. Glasses were cleared. Staff moved with practiced ease, returning the space to its resting state. The royal guard remained at their posts until the final guest had departed. Kate gathered her children and prepared to leave as well. She thanked the staff members she passed, her words sincere. Before stepping away, she paused briefly and met the eyes of one of the guards. She offered a small nod, a silent gesture of appreciation. The guard returned it, equally silent, equally respectful. That brief exchange carried more meaning than words ever could. Once the royal family had left the hall, the guards relaxed slightly, though never fully. Their duty continued, but the night's most important task had been completed successfully. Later, in private conversations among palace staff, the incident was spoken of quietly, not as a scandal but as an example. Newer staff members listened carefully, learning what it meant to protect not just safety but values. The story spread slowly, never exaggerated, never dramatic. It was shared as a reminder that respect was not optional within those walls. It was expected, protected, and upheld calmly. For Kate, the night ended peacefully. As she helped her children prepare for rest, she spoke to them softly about kindness and respect. She reminded them that everyone makes mistakes, but how we respond to them matters most. Her words were gentle, meant to guide rather than lecture. The children listened, understanding more through her tone than her words. They felt safe. They felt loved, and that was what mattered most. As the palace settled into silence, the events of the evening became part of its long history. Not recorded in bold letters, not announced loudly, but remembered by those who had been there. It was a reminder that strength did not always need a voice. Sometimes it stood quietly, stepped forward when needed, and then returned to stillness. And within those walls, that lesson would continue to live on, shaping future moments, guiding future actions, and protecting the dignity of all who walked through the palace doors. Morning light slowly filled the palace, touching the tall windows and quiet halls. The night before felt distant now, but its meaning remained strong. Staff members began their day as usual, moving with calm purpose. To anyone who had not been there, the palace looked unchanged. Yet for those who had witnessed the events, something subtle had shifted. Kate started her morning early. She believed routine brought peace, especially after a long evening. She shared breakfast with her children, listening as they talked about small things, something funny they noticed, a painting they liked, a question about the palace gardens. Their voices were relaxed and happy. That was what mattered most to her. She watched them closely, feeling grateful. Children remembered how they felt more than what they heard. They felt safe. They felt respected. And because of that, the previous night did not weigh on them. Kate knew she had protected not only their space but their sense of calm. Elsewhere in the palace, staff quietly reflected on the night before while continuing their duties. There was no official meeting, no announcement. None was needed. The response had been correct, measured, and complete. In a place built on tradition, that kind of quiet resolution was respected. The royal guard resumed their standard rotations. To the outside world, they were simply doing their jobs as always, standing tall, watching silently. But among themselves, there was a shared understanding. They had upheld more than protocol. They had protected dignity. One guard, during a brief pause, thought about how quickly a situation could change. A few careless words had tested the balance of the evening. What mattered was not the insult itself, but how it was handled. Calm had won. Respect had been restored without harm. News of the incident did not spread loudly, but stories have a way of traveling softly. In quiet conversations among trusted circles, the moment was mentioned, not with excitement but with reflection. People spoke of the calm response, the professionalism, and the reminder that respect was not optional, no matter who you were. Some said they admired how Kate never reacted with anger. Others spoke of the royal guard's discipline. Together, these thoughts formed a single message. True strength did not need attention. Days passed. Life at the palace continued. Events were planned. Duties were fulfilled. Laughter returned fully to the halls, yet the lesson stayed, woven into memory. Kate carried on with her work, visiting communities, listening to people's stories, offering support where it was needed. Those who met her noticed the same calm presence, the same warmth. If the incident had affected her, it did not show. She remained focused on what mattered: service, family, and kindness. At home, she continued teaching her children through example. She showed them how to listen, how to speak gently, how to walk away from unnecessary conflict. She did not shield them from the world, but she guided them through it with care. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens, Kate paused and watched her children run ahead. The sun was setting, casting soft colors across the sky. In that quiet moment, she reflected on how easily peace could be disturbed, and how important it was to protect it without losing oneself. The royal guard continued their watch, day after day, night after night. Their role was often unnoticed, but they accepted that. They knew that the best outcomes were the quiet ones, the moments when nothing went wrong because something had been done right. As time moved on, the escorted guest became just another memory. He did not return to the palace. Whether he learned from the experience was his own journey, but the boundary had been made clear, and it would stand for anyone who crossed it. Within the palace, newer staff members sometimes heard the story, shared carefully as guidance rather than warning. It became an example of how to act when values were tested, not with raised voices, not with force, but with calm certainty. The palace itself seemed unchanged, yet stronger in its silence. Walls that had seen centuries of history held one more lesson, small in action, large in meaning. For Kate, the event faded into the background of a life filled with responsibility and care. She did not seek recognition for how she handled it. She did not expect it. Her reward was seeing her children grow with confidence and kindness. For the royal guard, it was another day of service completed with honor. They returned to stillness, knowing that their presence alone often prevented moments from becoming something worse. And for those who had witnessed it, the memory remained clear, not because of drama but because of restraint, not because of anger but because of control. In the end, the palace was not shocked by loud action, but by quiet resolve. A reminder that respect, once defended calmly, carried more power than any harsh response ever could. That was how the story lived on, not as a headline but as a lesson in dignity, a lesson in protection, and a lesson in the strength found in silence.